So we learnt today MPs are getting a 5.5% pay rise next month. Their salary will go up to just over £91,000. Now, the Taxpayers Alliance says it's an inflation-busting pay rise, which will leave people aghast. Let's speak live to the head of campaigns, Elliot Keck. Good afternoon.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. This is actually lower than they were expecting to get, 7.1%, which would have given MPs a pay rise of over £6,000.
Yeah, well, listen, it's interesting. And this pay rise, I think, to be fair, is broadly in line with pay rises that we're seeing across the public and private sector. And of course, MPs don't set the pay rise themselves. This is something that is decided by an independent body. But I think we have to remember that it is MPs largely that are responsible for the pretty shoddy economic situation. We have sluggish growth. We have a record high tax burden and millions of people out of work. And I think when you're talking about, pay based on performance, I think taxpayers will look at the performance of MPs and really question whether this pay rise is warranted.
But the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA for short, who decide what the pay grade should be, don't they act as cover for MPs? Because any MP that is asked about should you accept this pay rise, the stock answer is, I didn't make the decision, it was IPSA.
Yeah, and I think this possibly speaks to the need for MPs to decide their pay themselves. That will actually bring proper accountability into the process. I think, listen, it was understandable why they shifted it to IPSA, because, of course, it's always going to be difficult for MPs to vote for a pay rise, even if they deserve it and even if they need it. But I do think there is this problem that they just have this shield every single year, no matter what the pay rise is, no matter what the performance or economic conditions it's based on. So I think that is something that does need to be looked at.
Richard Lloyd, who's chair of IPSA, has said, amongst other things, we are committed to supporting a parliament that reflects our society, where people from all walks of life can decide to become MPs. He's got a point, hasn't he, when it put people off becoming a politician if they can't afford to fund the process?
Well, it's one thing funding the process of becoming an MP, and many people have written about the huge costs it takes to become an MP. Listen, I think the problem is frankly, our parliament is too big. There's too many MPs, and it would possibly be better if we had a slightly slimmed down parliament, and then maybe we could have a conversation about whether MP pay should be higher. But I think, as I said, it's really difficult when the economic conditions are so poor and MPs are at least in part responsible for those poor economic conditions, to then see inflation busting pay rises. And that is what these are. I mean, inflation is now down to 4%. I think that's going to be really difficult for households to stomach, given the cost of living pressures that they're still facing.
MP salaries in the UK are still lower than countries like America, Italy, Canada, Germany and Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, many of those countries that you've just listed, frankly, are wealthier than us when you look at things like GDP per capita. Certainly a couple of those countries are, and I think that's ultimately what we should expect MP pay to be based on. How good is the economy? How strong is the economy? How wealthy are taxpayers and households feeling, and how prosperous is the country? And I think based on the recent performance of the economy, I think it's really difficult to justify such a significant pay rise.
Thank you for joining me live. Elliot Keck is head of campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance.